Minnesota Supreme Court ruling has gained national attention and sparked protests outside the state capitol, urging lawmakers to make a change.
The court overturned a sex crime conviction because the victim was voluntarily intoxicated, a loophole in the definition of mentally incapacitated under the current Minnesota state law.
In tonight's Eye on KELOLAND, why women's rights groups and sexual assault advocates say this highly publicized case is making waves all over the country.
There's so many barriers for victims to report and to talk about what's happened to them, and unfortunately this is just another barrier.
It's already difficult to get victims of sexual assault to come forward, a fact Compass Center Director Michelle Trent knows all too well from her years of counseling victims of rape and sexual assault.
I think there's a lot of messages that victims get from various people and places along the way that say this is your fault, or that if you wouldn't have done this thing, X, Y, or Z, whether that's consuming alcohol or worn this inappropriate thing or walked alone at night or fill in the blank with anything else that we tend to use for victim blaming.
Trent says the Minnesota Supreme Court ruling further discourages sexual assault victims to reach out to police.
It tells victims that they aren't important, that reporting sexual violence isn't going to get them anywhere. And so it sends a message, unfortunately, to victims that you might as well not talk about it to anyone. You might as well not seek justice because you're probably not going to get it.
Under the current law in Minnesota, the Supreme Court justices say there's a big legal limitation on what constitutes a sex crime in the state.
If you voluntarily become intoxicated, if you choose and you knowingly choose to consume that alcohol, and even if you become intoxicated to the degree that you really don't know what you're doing, you really don't know what you're saying yes or no to, if you voluntarily brought yourself to that point, an individual can have sexual intercourse with you, and it is not a crime in Minnesota.
Sioux Falls attorney Hope Machin says that's not the case in South Dakota, where she spent many years as Minnehaha County's chief deputy state's attorney, specializing in sexual assault cases.
And in fact, I had a case. She became intoxicated by her own choice, by her own decision. He was charged with rape. It was a very serious case. It was taken very seriously by the family, and he was found guilty. So you see, in South Dakota, and we don't have that issue.
She says there's no question the Minnesota Supreme Court correctly interpreted the state law.
The problem was as clear as the nose on my face. I mean, it was right there in the plain language. It can be remedied. It can be remedied.
Today, to let Minnesota know that no means no.
But it's not a problem the courts can address.
No means no. That drunk is not consent. That being forced or coerced is not consent. We need to make sure that these legislatures take us seriously, because if they're not going to defend us, we have nothing to protect us.
The solution can only come from state lawmakers.
Keep sharing it, keep speaking about it, keep making it.
And they're facing mounting pressure to take action.
We are working to change this law.
A bipartisan Minnesota House bill would expand the definition of mentally incapacitated to anyone who is too intoxicated to give consent.
Being intoxicated when you are assaulted doesn't make it any less difficult, doesn't make your healing any less real. It doesn't mean the assault is any less real. It's a very real thing that happens that perpetrators utilize all the time.
Trent says alcohol is a common factor in sexual assaults that can make the healing process even more difficult for victims.
This is something that happens every day in our community. So the community has a role to step up and say this isn't okay here, and it's not something that we want to have happen here, and what can we do to stop that?
Honoring victims of sexual violence.
An action many advocates are now taking, spurred on by the Minnesota Supreme Court ruling.
When you have justices calling out legal loopholes, it creates another level of this is something that should change. And so the realities of this is what it looks like if you don't change it, I think were appalling to the community at large, which is part of the national attention on it.
And the proposed change was approved by the Minnesota House Public Safety and Judiciary Committee on Wednesday. Laverne, Minnesota State Senator Bill Weber says he supports a change, but determining the exact legal language of a bill will be a challenge.